back or to my channel. Today's video we are going to be comparing Crested geckos versus Chahoua geckos, and I have been wanting to make this video for actually quite a long time, but I've never owned a Chahoua gecko, and recently, since I've been fostering Arlo the Chahoua gecko, I decided I would make this video. By the time this video is up, Arlo should be in his new permanent home. Someone is planning to adopt him in the next few days, but by the time this video is up, he should be adopted. Unless something falls through, then I will give you guys an update on the screen, either way, if he is or not. But Arlo is not staying with me permanently. I've been very clear about that, and I did think that we found his forever home, but again, sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. But I'm hoping the best for him, and his future owner seems really nice, so I hope everything works out. With everything being said, let's jump in and start talking about them. First up, this is Ace. He is my male adult Crested gecko. I don't have him on my channel too much, but he's doing really well, and I've had him for almost 2 years now, which is pretty crazy since it feels like I just got him. But we are first going to start off by talking about their caging and housing and the differences between Cresties and Chahuas when you are setting up their habitat and where they plan to live. The big major difference is obviously Chahuas are about double the size of a Crested gecko, so they're gonna need a little bit of a bigger enclosure. Now the average size for both of them seems to be an 18 by 18 by 24. I notice most people end up getting exoteras, or they get a 20 long and convert it. Now I personally think these sizes are fine for Crested geckos, but I think that they only make temporary habitat setups for Chahoua geckos. I really recommend at least 30 gallons if you're planning to get a Chahoua gecko, if not bigger. I recommend more like 40 gallons. So they do basically just need bigger things, which is not too much. I mean, it's not really more difficult, but they do need more foliage, obviously, if their enclosures are bigger generally, and they just are bigger geckos, so they're going to need, you know, usually more food. They're going to need just a little bit more of everything, but otherwise their care is quite similar, and just setting up their housing and everything is very, very similar. And here is Arlo. I know a lot of people were sad that I didn't show him in my first impressions video in person, but he was sleeping and I just handled him the day before. But here he is in person now, and he's just such a cool gecko, and he's very fun to care for and to also handle. This is actually only my 4th time ever handling him, and he still makes me a little bit nervous to handle, but he's a really great gecko and there's nothing to be nervous about. He's actually pretty chill, and he's a really amazing lizard. Anyway, now that I've hyped him up, diets for Crested geckos and Chahuas are very similar. They both eat Pangea or Rapashi, the same gecko diet, which basically comes, usually it's a mix of fruits, and sometimes they can have bugs and insects in them. You can get these usually at reptile stores, and that's usually where I get mine. You can also buy them online. And these guys obviously need a little bit more food than Crested geckos do, but usually you feed Crested geckos roughly every other day to every 2 days, and that's kind of how these guys are. Again, you kind of just want to watch your animal's weight and make sure that they're not gaining too much or losing too much. You kind of go off that, but it's mainly kind of an every other day to every 2 day type thing. Now for handling, Crested geckos are a bit smaller, as I've mentioned, even as full adults and obviously babies. They're generally just smaller than Chahoua geckos. But handling them is pretty similar, I've noticed. I personally have been so blessed and grateful to work with Arlo, who's a very chill Chahoua. If you didn't know, Chahuas tend to be known for being a little bit friskier and feistier and being a little bit harder to handle, but Arlo's very good with handling. I don't take him out often, but when I have, he is very good with handling. As you can see in some of the clips I'm going to put in this video, he's pretty good with handling. I notice Ace is a little bit more jumpy, but I will say that Chahuas can be a little bit more uncomfortable to handle just because they are larger if you're not used to a larger lizard or just handling them in general. So Crested geckos seem to be a little bit more jumpy and a little bit more all over the place, but Chahuas are a bit bigger, so that can be intimidating to some people. So there's not one that's really better than the other, but it's just things that you need to know if you are fully prepared and have quick reflexes to grab a Crested gecko that is leaping into the abyss. That's fine. Chahuas can do this as well, but I noticed that Arlo doesn't jump nearly as often, let alone really at all. So it is something to look out for and just be aware of. The only difference that makes these guys just a little bit harder is they do need bugs on a regular basis. Crested geckos can realistically live their entire life with not needing bugs, and even when you do offer bugs, you really honestly shouldn't offer them more than once a week to every couple weeks. I just offer them to Ace as treats, and he doesn't even take them most of the time. But these guys should get bugs back at least once or twice a week, and they need a good variety of them. Unlike Crested geckos, since they're more like treats and you don't have to feed them super often, you can just feed 1 or 2 different types, but these guys need a variation. Next is stress levels. I know a lot of people don't want to get an animal because they're worried they're going to stress them out too much and just handle them too often, and just a lot of small animals are especially known to just pass away randomly from random little things that can stress them out, so it is very good to be aware of these things. I noticed that they both have pretty similar stress levels. Ace really doesn't like being handled for too often. I noticed that Arlo's a bit better, but I do handle Ace a little bit more often than I do Arlo, so I noticed that Chahuas seem to be a bit better, being handled every once in a while for a little bit longer, while Crested Geckos, you can handle them more like once a week, but for maybe like 10 minutes max. So that's something to know, and I just noticed that when I clean both their enclosures, Chahuas seem to get stressed a lot less, like just a lot less. When I handle Ace and clean his enclosure in one day, I usually leave him be for at least a week or two before I move him or do anything with him or weigh him, because I noticed that he seems to get a little bit stressed and sometimes he won't eat for a day or two, just getting back to his regular schedule. But I notice Arlo doesn't faze him at all when I clean his enclosure. He loves to explore it and he goes right back to eating immediately. So I do notice that Chahuas seem to have a little bit less stress levels, which kind of surprised me since I know that they're a little bit more of an intermediate animal compared to a beginner, I don't really like calling them that, for a Crested Gecko. So that is something to be aware of, but it also could completely be the individual personalities of both the geckos that I personally care for, so it's more a case-by-case basis. The lifetime for both of these guys is pretty similar. The average lifespan for a Crested Gecko and Chahoua seems to be about 10 to 20 years. Chahoua geckos are much newer to captivity compared to Crested Geckos, so we don't know nearly as much about them. So this could be different a little bit. There's some Crested Geckos I've seen that can live to 25 or 30 years old, and since we don't know too much about Chahoua geckos, it's kind of unknown, but the rough estimate is about 10 to 20 years, since that's what most New Caledonian geckos live to about. So this is very similar. There's not really much difference here, and it's pretty similar, so you can't really compare them in that range, but it is a good amount of time, so please be aware this is longer than most dogs live, so you need to really prepare before getting either of them. Activity rates for these guys are pretty similar. I noticed Arlo comes out a little bit earlier than Ace does, but this also is different because Ace is down in my pet room. Arlo's mainly been up in my bedroom until today. He's just gotten out of quarantine, so they probably have pretty similar rates, so there's nothing that's going to be too different. They're both pretty similar. In conclusion, I cannot help you pick which is better. It completely depends your personal needs and wants for a lizard, but they both make great pets and I really recommend them. The only big difference is really size and enclosure space, but otherwise these guys are pretty similar and I really recommend them to people that do research and are right for them. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys next time. I love you so much. What are you doing? Bye.